Hello, everybody. Recording live from somewhere. This is Zach Couples with episode number 51 of the Movement Debrief. And tonight, folks, this one is going to be off the heezy for sheezy. We're going to talk about asymmetrical muscles. Why are your muscles asymmetrical? Is there anything you can do about it? What you going to do about it? We're going to talk about feet. We're going to talk about what those do in relation to hips and the rest of the body and all that jazz. And last but not least, we're going to talk about them bows. How is that impacted by a lot of different things, whether it's shoulder motion, all this stuff. That's what's on docket tonight. These are questions asked from the people, answered for the people, by this people, fam recognized fam. Before I dive into them, quick housekeeping, ladies and gentlemen. The Human Matrix is going to be in 3 locations this year. You should attend. If you are near or not even near, if you want to go to Seattle, Washington, September 15th and 16th. If you want to go to Kansas City, Kansas, Tech 9 may make an appearance. He may not either. October 27th to 28th. And then last but not least, November 10th and 11th, we will be in Portland. If you want to learn about how to maximize movement variability in your clients. If you are PT and you're not sure how to do squat and deadlift, maybe you don't like working with athletes, I'll teach you everything you need to know. I'll see you there. Without further ado, let's debrief, shall we? The first question. Sorry, Instagram, you keep tilting. The first question comes from, actually, 2 people. Barbo Training. I believe he was on that Instagram, baby. And then Austin M. Kaiser. He asked this at the last minute, and I'm going to combine it into one. So Barbo says, I was wondering if you could talk about working with clients or athletes who have one erector that is much larger than the other in your next podcast. Erector being low back muscles. And then Austin M. Kaiser says, hi Zach, can you talk about if progressive whole body barbell lifts will lead to symmetry if muscles are asymmetrical? Will one side increase in size to match the other until the demands of a heavy load can be met? Barbo and Austin, this is just an unbelievable question. However, I think you'll be sorely disappointed by the answer. Well, maybe not. Maybe you'll be invigorated. Who knows? So why are muscles asymmetrical? I mean, we got 2 biceps, we got 2 quads. Why are they asymmetrical? Because we, you, me, everybody is asymmetrical. We have a heart on this side, we have a liver on this side. There's alterations in brain side to side. We are not the same side to side. Thus, there is an inherent asymmetry that we all must not battle, but work with. This is going to make certain muscles predisposed to particular activities and other muscles predisposed to more or less activity. That's just normal. This asymmetry can be compounded when an individual loses variability. So if someone loses joint range of motion in a particular joint or a set of joints, that can also impact muscle activity. Because if you don't have access to all your degrees of freedom, then you're likely going to alter how you perform load-based activities or just life. So that can enhance the asymmetrical process. All of this stuff is normal. We can never expect to have perfect symmetry in the muscles because we are not perfectly symmetrical creatures. But what I can say to minimize maybe, or to balance out, if you will, as best you can, some of these asymmetries that we may have in muscles is probably a one-step process first and then doing some load-based things. The first would be variability restoration. If you don't have full joint range of motion in all your joints, you need to get that taken care of. That at least gives you the potential to have a fighting chance at having an even, or at least a more even workload distribution. Like I said, you don't have full motion, your body's going to manage load differently. That would be priority number 1. Priority number 2 would be then to load. And maybe that involves doing single leg work, single arm work, single whatever work, all of those things. So that way you are getting an even workload distribution between both sides. Now, Austin brings up an interesting point. Can you talk about if progressive whole body barbell lifts will lead to symmetry if muscles are asymmetrical? I don't think they necessarily will for the reasons mentioned previously. But also because you are doing a movement that's bilateral and we are asymmetrical creatures, there's still that inherent asymmetrical drive towards certain muscles being acted in a particular fashion and others not, especially as stress increases. we're going to go with a more efficient strategy to be able to perform a challenging task. So I don't think that doing something heavy that is bilaterally loaded, whether it's a bench press or a squat, is going to lead to symmetry happening. I really don't think anything is going to lead to symmetry happening. So if you are asymmetrical, you got some muscles that are asymmetrical, don't sweat it. Unless you're a bodybuilder, then maybe you're going to start doing some more isolation work, single arm, single leg stuff, and maybe that helps reduce it to a degree, but I don't think we're going to change it. One instance in which you may get a nice change, a real nice change even, in your asymmetry, is if you have had some type of procedure or an injury that led to a substantial degree of atrophy. And I've seen this in a few people. Actually, if you have a knee surgery or some type of knee injury, you can almost guarantee that's going to happen. But you can expedite the return to muscle growth with a nifty little tool called blood flow restriction training. I've seen this work pretty well where it restores muscle bulk fairly quickly compared to conventional methods. And I've had other colleagues do the same with some high-level people. So if you utilize something like that to improve muscular hypertrophy, that could be quite impactful. Another point in terms of the asymmetry, because I saw this study. Factors associated with paraspinal muscle asymmetry in size and composition in a general population sample of men. Don't write it down, folks. I'll link it in the show notes. But they were basically saying that there is this asymmetry in paraspinal muscle is potentially associated with back pain. However, this is for all of us non-back pain people, which is that anyone? This asymmetry is also found in asymptomatic subjects. Wow. You're okay if you're asymmetrical. I wouldn't sweat it too much. Like I said, if you do things like variability restoration, emphasize single arm, single leg work, if you have surgery, you do something maybe like BFR to help restore muscle bulk, you do those things, you're going to be okay. Don't sweat the asymmetry. You're still beautiful, sexy, outstanding people. Barbell and Austin, phenomenal question. Next question. Comes from Joseph from the UK. Coolest name ever. Joseph from the UK asks, could you clarify the desired outcomes for the feet in the pattern? I believe he's referring to the PRI left AIC, right BC pattern. Here's what I am confused about specifically, and I'll link PRI in the show notes for those who don't know what that is. Here is what I am confused about specifically. If true pronation of the foot would be the foot caving in this way, is associated with IR of the hip, which IR would be the hip caving in that way, and true supination is associated with ER of the hip, then why do we need the foot to supinate in order to attain true IR? I hope that makes sense. Joseph from the UK, it most certainly does. Let's talk about what the feet be doing. One little piece that's probably a little bit off, I would say, in your explanation, Joseph from the UK, is you got your rotation flip-flopped. So the pattern, if you are a PRI individual, or if you have someone who is unilaterally extended or in right stance, here's my shoes. Yes, this little product placement, Nike is now sponsoring me, guys. If we look from behind, make sure I do this right. If we look from behind, in right stance, the right foot or the right calcaneus is going to be more, well, the right foot's going to be more supinated, calcaneus inverted. The left is going to be more pronated, calcaneus everted. That's normal, right? Now there's some fancy things that can happen at the forefoot. So from the front, that's what I got, right? Right foot supinated, left foot pronated. Problem is I can't walk like this because I'm going to sprain my ankle. So what can happen sometimes with the foot is you can have the first ray plantar flex down so you get a little twist. This is like a fake, this would be like a fake pronation. But ideally, under normal circumstances, the feet should be able to alternate back and forth. But here's the problem. Rarely does that happen because perhaps there is some type of associated hip limitation that can prevent the foot from getting where it needs to go. Now, just from the UK, you do have the rotations wrong. In fact, it would be flip-flopped. And the way we can understand that it's flip-flop is by understanding if I move the feet into supination or pronation, which direction does the body go? Let me demonstrate. So, I am going to be in this position right here. Right foot supinated, left foot pronated. Watch. Okay? So, I shifted my body to the right. And I'm sorry you can't see me at home. But I shifted my body to the right. Now, watch me just pronate my foot on the right side. And I'm going to keep pronating, keep pronating, keep pronating. All of a sudden, ooh, glute med sizzling. You'll see that I shift to the left. In order for me to shift to the left, my right leg had to abduct. So pronation of the foot is associated with abduction of the hip. Now, I wonder what other mechanical things would happen in the other two planes, sagittal and transverse, when I abduct. What's associated with that would be flexion and external rotation. Okay, sorry, I didn't realize I was backward, but you know what I mean. Get your own shoes out. But external rotation, that's what would happen. So flexion, abduction, external rotation in the hip go together. So as I shift my body weight to the opposite side, the side that I pronate on, that hip abducts, externally rotates, and flexes. That's normal. So guess what happens on the other side? As I supinate the foot, adductor kicks in. What does adductor do? Well, it adducts the hip, but it's also going to pull me into IR and extension. So that's your relationship from the feet. So as I pronate, the hip should abduct. As I supinate, the hip should adduct. Well, what happens if on the left side, I can't adduct the hip? You're going to have a hard time creating supination possibly at a foot. So maybe some of the foot limitations that you may see could actually be related to something going on up higher at the hip. Just a thought. I've seen that quite a bit because as I've done things with restoring variability up top, whether it's hip and actually everything, a lot of times those foot limitations, barring that there's not pathology within the hip or there's something traumatic, are changed. I've seen dorsiflexion restored quite often in these cases. So if you have a foot issue, you may want to look up the stop. Another quick little tidbit about the first ray plantar flexing. So if you supinate and you want to contact the ground, but you can't pronate because maybe you have an abduction limitation, you fake pronation by plantar flexing that first ray. So that would be a compensatory strategy a foot may do in order to make up for the lack of abduction in a hip. Something to think about. Another possible compensation, how about this one, guys? If I can't go through the full twist when I walk, because ideally when you walk, you kind of go through supination, pronation, and maybe a little bit back to supination. The foot should twist. What if I can't do that because of a hip restriction? Well, what could happen is I may create a twist through this part right here, where your bunions sit. So I can't twist through the foot. I'm going to twist through the first toe. Do that enough reps, you develop a bunion because there's a lack of frontal plane mobility. Another thing to consider. So if you want to restore pronation and supination of the foot, you got to look up top. You want to get them to pronate, you need to get abduction, external rotation, flexion back. You want to get them to supinate, you need to get extension, adduction, and internal rotation. Now the cool thing is, if you do activities in standing, you can actually drive it, or actually any position, you can actually drive increases in hip mobility by doing changes at the feet. So I'll give you an example. Let's say you're doing sideline hip abduction as an activity. Get your Jane Fonda outfit out and lift the leg up. You can drive more glute med activity if as you do your sideline abduction, you pronate the foot, because that helps create that action. It would be a distal proximal activation thing. It's a PNF thing is what it is. I forget what the term is. Wow, that's killing me. Irradiation, that's what it would be. But that's also another way that you can enhance or summate the effects of what you're trying to do up top, putting the feet in the position that they need to, and that could possibly allow the muscles to work more effectively. So to summarize, Katie, before I even summarize, Katie St. Clair Fitness on that Instagram, baby! As a additional point, what are your thoughts on orthotics prior to fixing higher up? Ooh, that's a good one. So Katie's wondering, would I put someone in orthotics before I go with something up top? And the answer, in most cases, I'm sure there's cases where I would, maybe if there's substantial foot pathology, but rarely. Rarely would I say that I would put an orthotic on the feet before I do something up top. And I found that what can happen if you do that too soon is if you put orthotics on the shoes too soon, but you haven't taught someone the basics of what to do, like how to abduct the hip or adduct the hip, they don't know what to do with it. They don't know how to use the orthotics effectively. So you need to be able to teach those fundamental concepts first before you go trying to drive them in standing with some type of foot orthosis. So a lot of times what I will do is work on as much as I can as humanly possible with things higher up, so making sure I have thoracic, cervical, and pelvic variability. Once I've done that, if they're still having problems or maybe they're not keeping the changes that I want, then we might go into some type of footwear thing, whether that's a good pair of shoes or whether that's orthotics. But I will say that since I have redoubled my efforts at making sure that I have this clear, rarely have I had to do that. But I'm sure that there's cases in which it's warranted. I think it's hard to sell too because sometimes orthotics can be expensive. And a lot of times too, when they're made, you still have to make fine-tune adjustments. And I would say that's probably one thing that I would do with someone more so than get an orthotic, because with the people who I work with, I want to try to have them spend the least amount of money possible to get where they need to go. So a lot of times you can get by just doing an arch, like an arch support in the shoe. So like an arch pad, or if you do medial or lateral wedges in the heel, those seem to work wonders. And a lot of times you can bypass buying orthotics. I'll link those in the show notes as well, what I use. And just for clarity's sake on that, what's Rascal thing? So if I'm using a wedge, for example, like in this case where if I'm supinated in the foot, what I can do is I can put a lateral wedge on the inside of this, and I should have brought them, but put a lateral wedge to help tip the person into pronation. A lot of times you need an arch in this as well, though, to be able to get them to feel that. If I need to supinate someone, what I'll do is I'll put a medial wedge in the heel, and that will help tip the foot up. Something to consider. But that's typically how I would go about things. So to summarize that point, if I want to pronate, I need to drive abduction, external rotation, and flexion. If I want to supinate the foot, that's associated with extension, adduction, and internal rotation. You can drive those actions either bottom up or top down. From an orthotic standpoint, make sure you have the basics down first. And I am one of those people who would say go with the cheapest route possible. A lot of times if you get the basics, you don't need to go that route. But if you do, make sure you get them a good pair of shoes. You can do modifications with wedges and arch supports, or you can go the orthotics route. And that's typically the order that I go about things. Really good question, Joseph from the UK. And before I answer this next one, David Rasco, aka Bay, I'm even more excited to cuddle with you. Last question comes from my boy, Chris. Chris is like my boy. Back when I was in Memphis, funny story about that. Well, not really that funny, but it was just a cool story. He just, like, I was in the hallway or something, because it was, I don't know, a break. And he's like, oh, hey, I'm Chris. We should hang out. So we did. Good dude. In PT school right now, keep crushing. The question is about elbow range of motion. Can you talk about how proximal and distal positioning / strength / motor control affect elbow range, particularly extension? And is full elbow extension as important for joint health and injury prevention as terminal knee extension? Ooh, I see the association there. How does rotation at the elbow and shoulder impact the sagittal motion at the elbow? Whew. These are some tough questions, but I will give it a shot and see if I can answer them. So first question, how does proximal distal positioning affect elbow range of motion? I'll go with proximal first. So if we can think about things, a lot of times, if you have someone who's performing compensatory-based activity for whatever reason, so basically a lot of the people who we're going to be working with, they have developed movement limitations to cope with the world. A lot of times that involves alternating twists within joints. So for example, if I have a shoulder or a humerus that is relatively internally rotated, the forearm is oftentimes going to be more supinated. On the flip side, if I have a humerus that is more externally rotated, the forearm is going to be more pronated. And the reason why this is, too, also has to do with purposeful movement. I need to get my hands here, upright, thumbs up, Distal and Ebert, rest in peace to both. I need to get my hands here so I can do things with them. I can do more things when my hands have the thumbs up position or in a neutral position than I can if they're like this or they're like this. So that's always our goal from a purposeful movement standpoint. A lot of times, if you have a lot of twist and torsion within a joint, that could potentially lead to a painful experience. No bueno. So that's how proximal positioning oftentimes impacts things. I will not say that that is always the case, where you always have a twist at the elbow. Because sometimes, and this is where movement gets a little more complicated, you can have a humerus that is maybe in an externally rotated position in relation to the scapula, and the elbow would follow suit into a supinated position. So it's really hard to say. But when you're working with someone at restoring elbow range of motion, you definitely go from a proximal standpoint out. So I would address infrasternal angle. I would address how well they can put air into the pump handle action of the rib cage and the posterior thorax, address scap position, humerus, and then eventually you work your way down toward the elbow. Because a lot of times, if you restore all of that, if you get shoulder rotation back, a lot of times any elbow range of motion limitations you may have had will disappear. In terms of distal positioning, man, that is tough. And the reason why it's tough, and you can ask Brian Chung about this because he knows way more about hands than I do, is the hand's kind of a complicated thing on us. So as is the wrist. But what I will say is if there is a lack of pronation or supination within the elbow, that is going to impact wrist range of motion in some way, shape, or form. And the reason has to do with the distal radial ulnar joint. Because as you go from supination to pronation, there is a relative twist that occurs between those bones. And so if you have those bones in a particular position, that could potentially limit wrist motion, but in terms of, or hand motion. But in terms of how this impacts up here, it's kind of complicated, and that would probably be a blog post unto itself, and I would really have to think through it. So I would say still you would focus on things up top and address this as much as you can. What do we got next in that? Is full elbow extension as important for joint health and injury prevention as terminal knee extension? Teddy, I will answer that. Yes, because I do have some suggestions. Yes, the short answer, yes. Long answer, Chris. Anytime you have a loss of range of motion at any joint, that joint is going to be loaded in a different fashion. That's not good. So if you don't have full elbow extension, when you go to do activities, there's alterations in length-tension relationship of muscles. Problems can ensue, potentially because you are not loading in a safe manner or in an even manner. So yes, I think it's incredibly important. Now there's a lot of people who obviously get by without full elbow extension. but I don't think it's ideal. The last one, I think this one's probably going to be the more complicated piece. How does the rotation at the elbow and shoulder impact the sagittal motion at the elbow? I think these two things go hand in hand. So, in terms of associated movements, if we think about biceps brachii, this is your big elbow flexor. It also supinates the forearm. Hang on. There we go. Okay. It also supinates the forearm. So flexion and supination often go hand in hand. So Teddy, when you're talking about improving limited elbow flexion, what I would do is activities that would involve supination, first off. Now, would I flex? Hang on. I'm getting there. So supination and flexion go together. So if these guys go together, then the opposite, pronation and extension, must also go together because we twist. We twist as we move. We rotate as we move. Now, here's where things can get a little bit complicated. Sometimes you can have individuals who have a ton of elbow hyperextension. And maybe they still have a rotational limitation, or maybe they don't. And this could be someone too who has an elbow flexion limitation as well. What do you do for those people? If I got someone who has increased elbow extension, but they can pronate and supinate, or maybe they can't pronate and supinate, you likely have, or I should say, if they have a loss of range of motion anywhere else, and that could be elbow flexion, what you could have is a lax anterior portion of the elbow. So what you have to do for those people is provide some type of muscular reinforcement to make up for the ligamentous deficit or the capsular deficit. A lot of times, get out the tank top, go Arnold Schwarzenegger circa 1974 and do your bicep curls. That actually works wonders. And a lot of times if you just put the forearm in the position that you are limited in, you oftentimes see those rotational deficits clear up. On the flip side, you got someone who can't extend all the way. What you can do is find the forearm limitation that they have, put the forearm in that position, and then do some type of tricep activity. You do those things, you're in business, and a lot of times you can restore elbow extension that way. So that's typically what I look at when I'm looking at an individual who has some type of elbow issue after I've addressed everything else. So activities you may utilize. Also to take into consideration is what position the humerus was in at the start. So for example, if I have someone who maybe has had an IR limitation to start, and let's say that they had a lax elbow, so they had excessive elbow or that elbow hyperextension, and they couldn't pronate. Let's just say that was who we were working with. What I may do for that person is I will do a concentration curl, so the humerus will be in IR. I'll drop down, get a little bit of a reach, curl up in supinated position, hold that position, go into pronation, so that way I got brachialis kicking in. Ooh, love that brachialis. And then go ahead and allow yourself to straighten as you do this activity. Something to consider. Another thing that I really like, you got someone who can't extend all the way. What you can do is maybe a side plank, pronate the forearm, push so they're getting the elbow extension, or you can even go into a little bit of elbow extension with some support. But that's also another great way to restore elbow range of motion. And that's typically how I would approach restoring extension and flexion. You have to take into account the rotational aspect of things. Because just like at the knee, the screw hub mechanism, a very similar phenomenon occurs at the elbow. And if you don't have rotation restored, you can't expect to get end range flexion or extension. So to summarize, when you got someone with an elbow issue, you have to do these things. First, appreciate the proximal. So make sure you take care of your external angles, you take care of filling up the rib cage, you take care of scap position, humerus position before you even go here. All of that is going to impact what's happening here because our body has a tendency to go into alternating twists when we are stressed or threatened. That's our compensatory strategy. It's our job to untwist people. You want to restore full elbow range of motion because because it's important to get even load distribution throughout the joints. If you lack a range of motion in anything, loading is going to be altered at that given joint. That could potentially lead to problems, though not always. I won't make any blanket statements, unless that's a blanket statement. Last, when we're talking about elbow range of motion, supination and flexion go together. Pronation and extension go together. If you need to restore extension or flexion, use those moves to help guide you. But more importantly, use your clinical skill set to guide you by assessing all of those ranges of motion. And my easy rule of thumb for elbows is whatever motion they can't get into in the rotational planes, you put them there, and then you go into extension and you go into flexion while maintaining that rotational position. If you got someone who's got hyperextension, give them the biceps, fam. If you got someone who can't flex, check your rotation, get it where they need to go, and try to flex them. And if you do those things, you ought to be in business. Chris, phenomenal question, and I think that that is a good stopping point for us tonight. I want to thank you guys so much for tuning in to episode 51 of the Movement Debrief. It's been a doozy. I do want to apologize in advance. I will not be doing a debrief next week because I am going to be out of the country. I don't know how good the service would be in Costa Rica, and I'm certainly not going to bring my computer, phone, and camera there. So I apologize, but I'll make 52 dope as all hell. If you want to find out more about me, here's where I would go. Go to zachcouples.com. No, Katie, I appreciate you. Go to zachcouples.com if you want to find out more about me and what I know and what other people know who write on my site or what I am thinking about, whatever. Go there. Here's what you want to do. You want to sign up for the newsletter. You're going to get about 3 hours of me blabbing on pain and respiration. You'll get almost 50 pages of notes. You'll get a free acute to chronic workload calculator. And every Friday, I will send you goodies of what's going on cool on the interwebs before anyone else gets it. You can brag to all your friends. Be like, did you read this article? And they'll be like, no. Where'd you get that? ZachCouples.com. Please sign up for that. Also, I can help you. I can help you. There's 3 ways, at least 3 ways I can help you. Maybe you're toying, not moving as effectively as you want to. Maybe you can't squat as deep as you like to. Maybe you got some boo-boos, you ruled out the big bad stuff, and you think, hey, you know what, maybe if I move better, I would feel a little bit better. I can be your guy by helping you with a movement consultation. And guess what? If you are trainers and you got a client that you're struggling with and you don't know what to do, or maybe they've seen some people and they're still having some trouble, send them my way. We'll work together. You can be my hands. I will be your mind. Definitely sign up for a movement consultation. Once you've done that, you probably want to learn, hey, how can I do that with my peeps without having to talk to you all the time? Well, guess what? There's the Mentorship Program. You can sign up for that. Here's what we'll do. I will tailor your learning to whatever your needs are. We talk about all different kinds of things with my mentees. We talk about some of the stuff that I talked about today in the debrief. We talk about organization. We talk about crap ton of stuff. You definitely want to sign up for the Mentorship Program. Last but not least, maybe you're tired of learning from me and you're tired of, doing all these movement consultations. You want straight gains. Maybe you want straight losses. Or maybe you just want to win at your sport or at life. I can help you with that. I do offer online fitness training. Once a month, I will design a program. We'll talk weekly, make sure things are going well. The angels will sing, life will be good. Definitely hit me up for that. Once you're done with that, here's where else you can find me. You can listen to me if you don't want to see me. I wouldn't blame you. Because guess what? There's 50 other debriefs. Find me on iTunes or Stitcher at the Zach Couples Show. Once you subscribe for that and maybe wrote a review and said, hey, Zach, he's kind of weird, but I like listening to him. That'd be awesome. Once you've done that, let's go on social media, folks. First, I'm on Facebook, /ZCouples. Definitely hit me up there. I'm on Twitter. My handle is @ZCouples. And of course, I'm on that Instagram, baby. Instagram.com, Zach, Z-A-C, Couples, C-U-P-P-L-E-S. And the last place you can find me is on YouTube. Just search Zach Couples. You want a lot of exercise videos? I got them for you. I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your day. It's been a blast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Keep it real, but not to the extent where things go wrong. Stay hungry, stay learning, stay moving. And I'll see you next time. Deuces.